So far, the tools we've used have made global changes, that is, changes to the entire image. But Adobe Camera Raw offers some great ways to target specific areas of an image to work on. Let's get started by going to our Chapter 11 folder. I'm going to hit Control O on the PC, Command O on the Mac, and we're going to select the file Selective Edits. The first thing I'm going to show you how to do is limit our adjustments to specific colors within the image. We're going to go to the Hue, Saturation, and Luminance panel to do that, but first I want to show you the Recovery tool in all its glory. I touched on it in the last lesson and promised to give you a closer look. Well, here it is. Notice in the upper right portion of this image I have a completely washed out and blown out sky. There is no detail here, just a solid wash of cyan and white. How do I know that? Well, if I go and turn on my highlight clipping preview up here above the histogram, look at that area that is covered in a red overlay. That red signifies pixels that have no detail. They're all blown out at a maximum value. You can see down in my basic panel I've already set my exposure a bit to the left at a minus 0.15, but that has had no effect on blown out pixels here, and that is where the recovery tool comes in handy. Watch what happens to the image as I drag this slider to the right. You can see those red areas disappear like magic. Camera Raw is recovering highlight information, finding a way to pull detail out of areas that once were lost. It's actually able to reconstruct missing pixel information to give us full red, green, and blue values. Notice that there are still some scattered areas of red remaining, and this is a typical real-world result. Now, quite often you will be able to remove every last bit of red by dragging the recovery slider, but if you shoot in a very high contrast scene, you may end up with small pockets of red that Camera Raw could not reconstruct. But you can see that this is marked improvement over where we started with the image. The recovery slider is a fantastic tool that's going to salvage a large number of your images. Now let's go to our Hue, Saturation, and Luminance panel. We get there by clicking on this fourth icon on the left, and look at all of these sliders here. We're going to start with Hue. You certainly know by now that I'm not going to say, oh, just play around with those sliders until you get something that you like. No, we have a much more precise way of working. First, let me turn off this highlight clipping preview. We don't need that anymore. To use the hue sliders here, we are going to visit our old friend, the Targeted Adjustment tool, which is located up here in the toolbar. And like the on-image adjustment tool in Photoshop proper, this tool works by clicking on an image area and dragging. Here we'll be dragging left to right. Now with the Hue tab selected, I'm going to click on these yellow shingles, drag to the left, and note the hue changes. If I drag to the right here, we can get a nice sort of a lemony lime kind of yellow. And what's great about this tool? Well, only those yellows have been shifted. We haven't changed the green in the trees. We haven't changed the blue or the reds in the house. The color that we click on is the color that gets adjusted no matter where it falls within the image. Let's go down here and click on the blue molding around this window. We'll click, we'll drag to the left. That gives us a more of a cyan kind of blue. Notice the reds are remaining untouched. Let's move here to the right and get something in the purple range. There we go. Let's move on to the Saturation tab. Here we've got the same set of sliders, but this time we're going to affect, you guessed it, saturation. If I click over here in this foliage, target these greens, and drag to the left, you can see my green slider is moving. The yellow is moving as well. Yellow is a secondary color in there. And you can see the foliage is now desaturated by a large amount. Let's actually take it back and boost the saturation up a bit. And let's do something to the red in here. We'll click on the red, and let's boost the saturation up here as well. See how easy it is to target specific colors. We simply click and drag. We're not having to make a mask. We're not having to make any kind of selection. It couldn't be easier. The last thing I'll do here is click and take a little saturation out of the yellow there. And let's move on finally to our Luminance tab. Luminance is just a fancy word for brightness. So with these controls, we're simply going to brighten or darken colors here in the image. Let's go back and click on the green foliage, and what I want to do is brighten these a bit. There we go. We'll open them up right about there. Now let's take a look at how much work we've actually done. I'm going to toggle the preview off and on. Here's the file we started with. And here's the file after our adjustments. A huge change. So you can get a sense of how drastic a change you can make to an image without creating a mask, without defining any selections. You simply click and drag. Now let's get even more selective. Instead of altering similar colors throughout an image, suppose we want to limit our adjustments to specific locations in the image. Well, that's easy to do with the adjustment brush. That tool is located up here in the toolbar. We'll click that, and notice along the right we have a completely new set of options. Now exposure, brightness,